everyone. This is Jeff Wilkerson, Professor of Physics at Luther College, bringing you the next in our series of what to look for in the night sky. We're talking about the week of June 13th, 2022, so working our way into summertime here. And we've spent much of the last few weeks, the last month, looking at the stars, thinking geometrically about the zenith and what stars appear directly overhead, depending on where you are on Earth, and thinking about these sorts of different things. We spent a good deal of time prior to that talking about the moon and the planets and thinking about the gathering of planets in the morning sky. We're going to circle back to that this week for a little break and what we've been doing, what we've been talking about. I'm sure you'll remember our discussions of much of this work with where the planets are in the morning sky. I'm assuming this is what you think about most of the time, is these videos, what you talk about with friends and family. I don't know what else you would talk about. So this in the evening of the 13th, let's start there. On the evening of the 13th, the moon will still be filling out very close to full. So it's actually very, very close to full, the 13th into the 14th. And so it's filling out just slightly as we get into the evening of the 13th here in the middle part of North America. And as it gets dark for us, this nearly full moon, 98% full or 99% full moon, will be very close to the bright orange star Antares in Scorpius. And we talked about this region of the sky last week. Again, I know you know that because that's all you've been thinking about, I'm sure. Ophiuchus sits up here. We looked at globular clusters in Ophiuchus last week. And below Ophiuchus is this bright orange star Antares. The moon will be about, for me, when it gets dark, the moon will be about 10 degrees east of Antares. So that's Antares in Scorpius right there. We got the stars that mark the head of Scorpius, and there's a big sweep of a scorpion's tail down there. And for those of you who live east of where I live, and particularly well east of North America, when it gets dark, the moon will be closer to Antares, and you'll have a better pairing of the moon with Antares. The moon is tracking off this direction as it does. It's moving easterly against the background stars as it fills out here. So this is a great way to start the week. A big, bright, full moon, so we'll not be able to see a whole heck of a lot of other stuff. Like if you're interested in the globular clusters in Ophiuchus that we talked about last week, globular clusters are bright enough. You can probably still see them a little bit. Maybe not. I don't know, because this full moon's pretty close right there. It's just not a great night to observe a lot of other things, maybe other than double stars and planets. We'll talk a little bit about the planets again here in a moment. So as the moon tracks easterly across here, by the time it gets to the evening of the 17th and really the morning of the 18th, so we're talking about Friday evening the 17th, but really after midnight, so it's Saturday morning the 18th, the moon will have moved over into Capricornus. It will have passed through full and will be starting to wane and will be about 80% full. So still a big, bright moon, but not as close to full as it was to start the week. And it'll be about 6 degrees south of Saturn. And so Saturn, just as you could see, remember a fist held at arm's length is about 10 degrees for most people. So that's about one fist is how far the moon is away from Antares to start the week. And it'll be something on the order of half to 2/3 of that below Saturn, south of Saturn, to end the week. So this will be a fine bearing to get out and look at, to see Saturn in the morning sky after midnight, and to see the moon, the waning moon, slip past it as it continues to track to the east. Now, just below Saturn, 2 degrees, a couple of finger widths below Saturn, is Deneb Algadi, the tail star in Capricornus. And again, if you've watched these videos for any length, any period of time, you know we've been talking about Saturn. So Saturn relative to Deneb Algadi, the tail of the goat, we've been tracking it. It's been sitting near that star for a very long time. And at the late in the year last year, summer into fall, late summer into fall last year, Jupiter was very close to this grouping as well. So Jupiter was over in here to form a nice trio with Jupiter, Saturn, and Deneb Algadi. Jupiter has moved on. So what we can think about here now, one of the interesting things for us to think about this week and through the coming few weeks and months is how quickly or slowly the planets appear to move against the background stars. Saturn is out there far enough that it's moving slowly enough in orbit, and it's far enough away that any motion it has in orbit, or actually any motion that appears to jump back and forth as we orbit, because we're looking at it from over here, and then we'll look at it from over here, and we'll see it move against the background stars. But then it's far enough away that the amount it appears to move in an angular sense, in a sort of shifting across the sky, is actually pretty small. And that's why we haven't seen this move very much. Jupiter is just enough closer that its orbit is enough faster, and any actual linear velocity, any actual linear motion gets converted to a bigger angular motion, a bigger apparent angular move on the sky to us. You see what I'm talking about here. Here's Earth, and here's Jupiter. Here's Mars, and here's Jupiter. This is not even close to scale. Mars and Jupiter and Saturn out here. And so if these things all move a certain distance in their orbit, if they all move the same distance, it takes Saturn longer to move the same distance in its orbit as it takes Jupiter to move it. And Jupiter takes a lot longer than Mars to move the same distance. But even if they all moved the same distance, this would look like a bigger angular move for Mars, and a smaller angular move for Jupiter, and an even smaller angular move for Saturn. So Saturn takes longer to move that distance, and that distance gets converted to a smaller angular motion across the sky. Hopefully that's it's a disaster of a diagram, I get that. But hopefully you can see what that looks like just a little bit. And all that gets us back to this idea that Saturn hasn't moved relative to Deneb Algady all that much since last year. It has moved, for sure, but it's still in that vicinity where we can see Deneb Algady. Now, Jupiter is a good solid 40 degrees over this direction from Saturn. So Jupiter and Mars, if you've had a chance, I hope you've had a chance. We haven't been talking about this lately because we talked about the planets so much earlier. We wanted to move away from that. I hope you had a chance to get up in the morning and see Jupiter and Mars. They formed a really nice tight pairing at times in the morning sky here. Mars is moving away from Jupiter, and again, it's mostly the motion of Mars, because in any one day, Mars moves a lot more in its orbit than Jupiter does, and that motion also leads to a bigger apparent angular motion as we see it. So Mars is tracking away from Jupiter, and this is a great time to get this sense. You should recognize these as the two brightest objects. Before Venus comes up, these are the two brightest objects in this region of the sky as we're looking to the southeast. And you'll see Jupiter and Mars there, and you'll see that nice pairing. Mars's red should show to you. But measure it. Draw sketches. Go out this week and draw sketches and see Mars relative to Jupiter, and draw pictures of what they look like, and watch it for the week ahead, and then the week after that, and the week after that, and watch that gap between them grow and grow and grow over the coming weeks. So the planets are starting to get more spread out. There's a little bit of buzz out there about all these planets lined up this month in the morning sky, and it's true, but I don't think they're as impressive as they've been at times in the past right now, as they're starting to stretch out. That 40 degrees from Saturn to Jupiter is a pretty big distance. You're going to see that stretched pretty far across the sky. Saturn rises about midnight for me. Okay, so Saturn gets up about midnight, and that's when, after midnight, you can start to see this. Jupiter rises about 1:30, and Mars rises about 2 o'clock in the morning for me at this time. And so you'll see these things, that gives you a sense of the separation of these. Venus will come up a couple hours after Jupiter. So Venus rises at about 3:30, and so as you get closer to sunrise, you'll see Venus is brighter than any of these objects. You'll see it crawl into the sky and continue this line. But again, it's spread out. It doesn't rise for a couple hours after Jupiter rises. So these things are getting to be a little bit spread out here across the sky and stretched. Mercury will follow this up at 4:15 or so a.m. for me. It's good. It's hard to see right now, and so I'm not sure you want to even go out and try, but no reason not to try. To see Mercury, use your binoculars and see if you can pull it out of there. But it's starting to get light here by the time it's rising for me, and so it's in the glow of the sun pretty darn good here. So anyway, you see these planets stretched across the sky. We see that Saturn hasn't moved very much, and we think about this geometry. We've thought a lot about geometry this spring and this summer as we've been moving through this video series. And I hope you have as much fun thinking about geometry as I do. Geometrical thinking. I'm sure I've told you this before. When I teach the introductory course to astronomy, the general astronomy course that non-science majors take for their natural world requirement, their natural world lab requirement here at Luther College, Oh, I have a list of learning goals. That's the way we build a course, right? You make a list of learning outcomes and say, this is what we want students to be better at. And then I build the course around that. I say, here are the activities we want to do to try to get better at those learning outcomes. And one of the learning outcomes that's on there is what I call geometrical imagination. How to be able to picture things geometrically, to be able to look at the sky and picture what geometry gives rise to what we see and what motions we see and how this goes, and just to be better at exercising our brain at being able to say, what if we stand in this position and stand in this position? What if the universe were shaped different? What if the solar system had this? What if this? What if this? And to picture geometry in 3 dimensions and all of this. And so this is what we're doing right now, is we're practicing that kind of geometrical imagination. We see that Saturn hasn't moved very much against the background stars. Jupiter has moved a lot more, and over the coming weeks you'll be able to watch Mars separate from Jupiter very quickly and see how much more quickly Mars is moving as it moves across this direction. So get out there this week, enjoy the moon as it reaches full early in the week and then wanes toward 3/4 full at the end of the week, and then use that to watch the planets in the morning sky. And I think it'll be a fun week. I hope you have clear skies and can get out and do a little bit of observing this week. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll have something more for you next week.